In the United States in 2025, poverty is no longer just a personal tragedy. It is being treated as a crime. And if there's any place that best illustrates that painful truth, it's Skid Row, the area where the homeless are herded together like the invisible sinners of our time. In less than 50 blocks, Skid Row is like another country within America, a forbidden zone where law is pushed back, police are wary, and hope is eroded day by day. Nearly 4,000 people are crammed together living on sidewalks amidst garbage, tattered tents, and the decay of a city once called the City of Lights. There, dreams were a luxury, and every time you opened your eyes, it was a struggle for survival, against hunger, cold, and the cold indifference of an entire society. In today's video, we'll explore Skid Row through the most authentic perspectives, from life on the streets to controversial sweeps, from the stories of those who still hold on to hope, to the simmering anger of a community that has been pushed down for too long. There are places that make you wonder, is this really America? And Skid Row is one of them. Los Angeles in film is considered a perfect symbol of the American dream, modern, wealthy, and full of opportunity. But just a short turn off Broadway, and you'll find a hidden corner that even the police don't dare to step in, where dreams lie on the streets in distorted forms. Skid Row is unlike any other place in America. Within less than 54 blocks, over 4,800 homeless people are crammed into makeshift tent camps amidst trash, graffiti paint, and the rustling of mice behind every dumpster. The tents, made of plastic tarps, rope, and whatever they could find, looked like fragile fortresses against a harsh world. The walls of the house were sprayed with paint to the point where the original color was no longer distinguishable, while the road surface was stained with wastewater and the marks of forgotten months. Although Skid Row is only a few minutes' drive from the financial district and popular tourist areas, it actually resembles an abandoned refugee camp more than a part of the world's richest city. Lack of toilets and bathing facilities means many people have to use buckets for personal hygiene and then dump them on the street. The smell of urine mixed with the hot, dry air of Southern California, creating a thick and oppressive atmosphere that made anyone who walked through here hold their breath and run as fast as they could. Food distribution centers, temporary shelters, and charities are still operating, but not enough to stem the growing tide of homelessness. This area records a high incidence of mental health issues, substance abuse, HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, hepatitis, and typhoid. COVID-19 is just one of many threats. Before and after it, Skid Row remains a health hotspot, a 21st century slum located right in the heart of the planet's largest entertainment culture. Strangely enough, for most Los Angeles residents, Skid Row seems not to exist. They often avoid mentioning it or even act as if it doesn't exist. Because Skid Row is still considered a street shame by American residents. Despite the city government launching numerous programs like Inside Safe to get people off the streets, the root causes remain unaddressed. From excessively high housing costs, a lack of mental health support, and loopholes in grassroots policies to issues of compassion within the community. While glass buildings continue to rise and tourists flock to the bustling streets of Hollywood, Skid Row persists as a bitter reminder. Not everyone achieves the American dream, and sometimes that dream crumbles just a few blocks from paradise. Why would a city as vibrant as Los Angeles, the city of stars, allow an area to become a slum in the mid-21st century? And what happens when those left behind no longer dream? Don't take your eyes off the video, because the journey of the homeless in Skid Row to find life doesn't stop at dry statistics. Behind that, there's also a long-standing battle between the authorities and the very Skid Row street residents waiting for you to discover. The homeless, by nature, They are people who no longer have a roof over their heads. But in Skid Row, the tragedy doesn't stop there. Because instead of helping them find a place to return to, the authorities are making them lose their shelter once again. Each camp clearing campaign that takes place here is like taking the last meal from someone who has been starving for 3 days. Entering Skid Row, besides the people wandering the sidewalks, you'll also encounter security teams, groups dismantling tents and garbage collection trucks. They appeared so frequently that they became a familiar part of the rhythm of life in this hell. And each such wave means hundreds of people are pushed out of their temporary shelters, losing their fragile protection against the darkness and dangers of nightfall. Personal belongings were thrown away, medicine was gathered like trash, and personal documents were lost without a trace. People not only lose their homes, but also their last vestiges of dignity and their presence in the eyes of the community. The government claims that alternative temporary housing options are available, typically converted hotels or short-term accommodation centres. But in reality, there aren't enough rooms, the admission process is complicated, and many people don't meet the criteria. People who have been on the housing waiting list for years still haven't received any notification. As for those temporarily placed in hotels, they are sometimes only allowed to stay for 7 to 14 days, before being asked to leave due to overcrowding or lack of funds. They return to the streets, or retreat into darker, deeper, and more out-of-sight corners. And once again, they became homeless. But this isn't just a story of a few flattened tents, but rather the silent fracture within a city once called the City of Angels. In Skid Row, the area with the highest homeless population in the country, sweeping the encampments does not equate to a solution. This approach, though described as maintaining public order, is being heavily criticised. Many social organisations believe that simply destroying without providing alternatives is ineffective and harmful, forcing people to relocate without any viable options. It pushes them into a vicious cycle, from tent to street, and then back to another tent, more temporary, more precarious, more isolated. In the eyes of some nearby residents, the clearance is necessary to maintain the hygiene and safety of the neighbourhood. But even they had to admit, that wasn't the way to end the problem. It was just temporarily pushing it out of sight. Because if we break camp today, a new camp will spring up tomorrow. And when the only thing we remove is people, the only thing left is a colder city than before. If a society is judged by how it treats its most vulnerable members, what is the image of Skid Row showing us? And if a city can erase people as easily as trash, then is what's being lost just tents? Or is it human governance itself? And that's just the tip of the iceberg. When the law begins to view a person's existence as a problem to be solved, the abolition of human rights through legally named documents is gradually becoming normalized. In Skid Row and many other major cities across the United States, a new wave of policies is slowly taking shape, not to address homelessness, but to sweep it out of sight. But it was precisely that approach, when taken to extremes, that touched the delicate line between maintaining order and stripping away basic human rights. In 2024, the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case of Johnson versus Grants Pass, a lawsuit concerning a ban on sleeping outdoors on public land in the small city of Grants Pass, Oregon. This city fines homeless people up to $295 just for setting up a tent overnight in the park, while they themselves have no legal alternative shelter. The issue isn't just the fine, it's a precedent. If sleeping to survive is considered a crime, what other basic rights do humans have left? In Los Angeles, many similar decrees are also being quietly enforced. Ordinance 41.18, a controversial regulation, allows the city government to prohibit the homeless from setting up tents near schools, libraries, walking paths, or public buildings. The list of no-go zones is getting longer, while the list of shelters remains the same, or is even being cut. The problem lies in perspective, that the homeless are seen as a burden rather than victims. From that perspective, the solution isn't support, it's control. Phrases like public space management and school safety protection sound right, but behind them are decisions that legitimize pushing people out of the community. According to the National Homelessness Law Center, over 150 cities in 32 US states have enacted regulations prohibiting outdoor sleeping, camping, or storing personal belongings in public places, regardless of whether the person has other legal options. Those bans weren't just empty words. They were enforced by fines, handcuffs, confiscation of belongings, or simply by forcing people to leave without any alternative destination. In Skid Row, the impact of these policies is evident. Many people choose to hide deeper in dark alleys, living in isolation to avoid detection. Some people don't dare to set up a tent. They just spread out a piece of cloth to sleep temporarily, for fear of being fined, evicted, or harassed. The cruel thing is, they didn't disappear from the city, they just disappeared from its sight. Because in the end, a society is measured by how it treats its most vulnerable members. If the existence of a poor, homeless person is considered a criminal act, then perhaps what is being threatened is not just urban safety, but the very dignity of society as a whole. And if the law can be used to make a person disappear from the streets, then tomorrow, could it be used to make any of us disappear from the right to live in the true sense? In a place where people live on the streets, it seems there's nothing left for anyone to profit from. But Skid Row, with thousands of homeless people crammed onto the sidewalks, is becoming the center of a strange industry, the homeless management industry. And the remarkable thing is, the more people left behind, the more strongly the money flows through this system. Each year, the city of Los Angeles alone spends over $1.3 billion on programs to support the homeless. It sounds like a lot of effort, but Skid Row is still packed with tents, rats, and people with nowhere else to go. This inevitably makes residents wonder where that money went. A portion is used to operate temporary shelters. A portion of the payment for consulting, research, and campaign communication contracts. Some of it goes to non-profit organizations, many of which are truly working for the community. However, many analysts share that this money exists as a legal facade to collect revenue, pay six-figure salaries to executives, sign internal contracts, and not leave much impact beyond the flashy reports. A social worker who used to work in the system sighed. The homeless are still here, but management contracts are becoming increasingly expensive. And what about transitional housing programs? Many places are rented out at high prices, then converted into temporary shelter centers that only allow short-term stays. After that deadline, the residents must leave and wait on a 10-page long waiting list. This cycle not only perpetuates homelessness as a long-term condition, but perhaps also turns it into a quantifiable line item in the city's budget. A resident living near Skid Row shared, "I don't deny that the authorities have made an effort, but the opacity in the spending made both us and the homeless people on the streets feel like our trust was being betrayed." It's truly chilling to think that there are people who are living stable lives simply because others cannot. In Skid Row, organizations providing food, medical care, public showers, and winter blanket distribution programs are still operating. But precisely because these tent camps have existed for so long, those services have become permanent needs. Not a bridge to a solution, but part of a supply chain, in which poverty is a condition of existence. And somewhere in that repetition, human dignity is unconsciously replaced by indicators. The number of distributions, the number of beds used, the number of people supported overnight. Every human being, from a full and complex existence, is compressed into a single data unit. Easy to manage, easy to report, easy to request additional budget. It's also undeniable that there are many people in this industry who are making a real effort. But when the system becomes so complex that few can distinguish between goodwill and self-interest, it is precisely those who need the most protection who are turned into tools. Homelessness in Skid Row is no longer just a social crisis. It is being maintained passively, even unconsciously, as part of the urban operational structure. It's not because people don't know how to end it, and because there are too many people who don't want it to end. So, when will a person's existence no longer be a basis for someone else to get rich, and suffering no longer be turned into a work quota? In the sewage-scented and dusty streets of Skid Row, where hope seems to have drained away, there are still people who quietly choose not to give up. It's not because they're stronger than anyone else, and because they understand, if they don't save themselves, no one else will do it for them. Amidst the closely packed rows of tents, you might come across a man in his 60s, a former welder, who is personally welding the iron frame to build a canopy for those around him. He had nothing left but an old shopping cart, a broken radio, and a few faded clothes. But every morning, he woke up, boiled water, made coffee from used filter bags, and shared it with those who were too dazed to get up. He shared, "If only I had more." I was able to help myself, and people in similar situations are struggling for their lives here. Skid Row isn't just about despair. It also has kindness, in its purest and unpaid form. The elderly women, former nurses, cleaners, and cooks, now use their remaining skills to care for wounds, help clean the camp, and protect the young children when strangers appear. Amidst the worst conditions, a small community was built, with no budget, no cameras, and no media logos. Only people with people, sharing the same suffering, sharing the same belief. Those who have nothing left to lose, but still refuse to lose themselves. Though not mentioned in the news, they're doing what an entire system has failed to do, preventing human dignity from completely collapsing. Through small acts, sharing a blanket on a cold night, helping to cover the tarp when it rains, they built a kind of simple and unexpectedly enduring kinship. The existence of those individuals does not obscure the harsh reality of Skid Row, but it makes people stop, look closer, and realizing, while the entire system was grappling with budgets, decrees, and political battles, the marginalized people were truly living out what a civilized city should have embodied from the beginning: compassion. Is it possible that if those who are abandoned can still reach out and support each other, then the rest of us still have a chance to fix what is breaking? Initially, many people living around Skid Row simply felt empathy. But as time went on, that sympathy gradually gave way to a more complex feeling: helplessness, awkwardness, and even fear. Residents in the area started locking their doors earlier. Shops posted signs saying "no public restrooms," and schools erected additional barriers. A convenience store owner shared, "I used to let them come in and ask for water, but now they've stolen a watch and 2 bracelets that my mother left for my wife." It wasn't because he'd lost his kindness. It was because he was tired of seeing the situation unchanged, or even getting worse. For many, living near Skid Row is like standing next to an open wound of the entire city. They saw, they heard, they smelled, but no one came up with a feasible solution. They began to ask, what am I paying taxes for if the government can't even handle this area? But conversely, the homeless themselves also feel pushed out of the community, alienated, even despised. Some people say that as soon as you step into a convenience store, all eyes are glued to your tattered backpack and worn-out sandals. I don't want to steal anything at all. I just want to buy a bottle of water. But they looked at me as if I didn't belong here, said a woman in her 50s, who used to work as a cleaner and now sleeps on the sidewalk every night. Community sentiment is real. The residents' concerns are real. But what's more concerning is when we all start to accept this as normal. When the presence of tents and people sleeping on the sidewalks becomes a familiar sight that no longer tugs at our hearts. Some local charities are still tirelessly connecting residents with the homeless through community meals, street cleaning activities, and small dialogues in the park. They believe that understanding each other is the first step towards healing. But while the entire system continues to fail, every effort to connect is like putting a small bandage on a festering wound. The community is not wrong to be worried. Homeless people are not wrong to seek shelter. And perhaps the scariest thing isn't on either side, but in the ever-widening gap between them. A distance not measured in a few city blocks, but in the silence, weariness, and resignation that have lasted too long. When will we finally sit down, not to argue about who's at fault, but to understand what's turning people who were once neighbours into strangers on the very same sidewalk? When a homeless encampment is cleared, people often only see the superficial results. The streets are swept clean, the sidewalks are empty, and a statistical report with the words "successfully cleared." But for those who truly live on Skid Row, what remains is not orderliness, but a deep void, not easily filled. Because after each bulldozer leaves, what's buried isn't just tarpaulins and broken beds. It's a part of identity, a part of memory, and countless daily efforts to survive. After each camp clearing campaign, people lose their homes, but support organizations also lose their connections. A volunteer nurse said, "We can't find them again. They lost contact, had no phone, no address. They disappeared." And when a homeless person disappears from the map, from the support list, from medical records, they also gradually disappear from social awareness. Many people were forced to leave without being able to bring their documents, medication, or even basic belongings. A backpack mistaken for trash, a plastic bag containing medical records thrown onto the street. In the eyes of the cleaning crew, it's trash. But for the lost, that's all that's left to remind them that they once had an identity, that someone once called them by name. It's not just the homeless who are affected. The surrounding community also suffers repercussions after each clearance. The residents witness the camp being destroyed, the sound of screaming and crying, the screeching of metal, and then silence. That silence is more terrifying than anything. It marked a complete turnaround. No one reacted anymore. No one questioned anymore. No one dared to ask questions anymore. Although the camp clearing campaigns were carried out in the name of order, hygiene, and the common good, the truth is, what was left afterwards was hardly something that could be called progress. A clean sidewalk doesn't mean a problem has been solved. An empty lot doesn't prove that suffering has disappeared. Conversely, what remains is a sense of barrenness, not only for those who were displaced, but also for those who witnessed it. It's a building that's still lit up, but no one wants to be near it. It's an empty patch of land filled with smouldering trash under the sun. It's a memory that hasn't had time to heal before being dug up, leaving another scar on the city map. So, if after each of these victories, we lose a little more of our ability to see and hear each other, are we solving the problem, or are we gradually becoming numb to the very thing that makes us human? Skid Row is not just a place. It's a mirror reflecting the cracks in society that we sometimes try to ignore. Each tent flattened, each person pushed into the light, is not just a part of the homelessness crisis, but also a reminder that something is wrong, right in the way we accept everything as if it were normal. We used to live in an America where neighbours knew each other's names, where community was a refuge. So, what has made us accustomed to seeing people huddled on the roadside and passing by without looking back? If Skid Row is the present, what will the future of other cities be like? And if a person's presence can be swept away like garbage, what is sacred about the two words human rights? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to tell stories that not everyone is willing to listen to, but everyone needs to know. Each share is an opportunity to add one more person who understands, one more person who cares, and one more ray of hope for those whose lives are lived in silence. This video is not intended to condemn any organisation, individual, or political group. All information presented is based on publicly available data, official reports, and field observations from multiple perspectives. The stories, images, and perspectives presented are educational in nature, reflecting social realities to stimulate constructive discussion without creating incitement, panic, or stereotyping. We do not condone any illegal behaviour whatsoever. We do not normalise suffering, and we do not turn human misery into entertainment. This is not a conclusion, but an invitation to reflect together, to dialogue together, and to hold on to the remaining humanity within each of us.